Hello and welcome to Tata Literature Live, the Mumbai International Lit Fest co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Tata Projects and powered by Godrej. This session is presented by the K.V. Mariwala Philanthropy Initiative. There will be a short question and answer at the end of the session, so please send in your questions in the comment section. Anne Enright is one of the leading authors of her generation. Based out of Dublin, she is a writer, essayist, academic, and the winner of the Man Booker Prize for her novel, The Gathering. In 2015, she was appointed as the first laureate for Irish fiction. Her writing explores themes such as family, love, identity, and motherhood. Joining her is critically acclaimed author Siddharth Shanghvi, who's recently made his non-fiction debut with Loss, which is as much a memoir of grief as it is an ode to life. And now presenting Ties That Bind.
In Actress, her recent and brilliant new novel, Anne Enright, revisits the many ideas that connect her books. How families fail each other, a central loss, a death that becomes aperture for reconciliation or insight, and the Proustian notion that the people we love will eventually, inevitably, betray us without ever meaning to. Enright is based in Dublin, also one of the settings for The Gathering, her fourth novel, which was awarded the Booker Prize in 2007. Like her literary forebear, Virginia Woolf, Enright takes the stuff of everyday friction and larger deceits and transforms it into the stuff of high literature. She writes in a way that's tough and very elegant. Not elegant in a prissy way, but in a way to suggest that her characters have a good shot and aren't afraid of doing time. Catherine, the actress at the heart of this novel, is deceased, and her daughter, Nora, is reconstructing her mother's life, if only to understand what happened between them. Enright's talents are manifold and deep and profound. Her achievements are many and publicly recognized. I've been lucky to know her for around a decade or so. And while we're not in regular touch, I will never forget how Anne messaged and checked up on me during the horrible second wave of COVID in India over this summer. Enright is an excellent friend. And this is perhaps the highest recommendation that I might make of someone. Anne Enright, welcome back to Tata Lit Life. How are you?
Very well, Siddharth. All the better for seeing you. It's lovely to be connected again this way, albeit a little bit formally. Yeah.
You know, if you allow me, I want to make a very brief space for the wonderful Anil Dharkar, who was the founding director of Tata Lit Life and who facilitated our first visit when you came to see us in India. And Anil unfortunately passed away this year. So I want to hold space for him and also for Shashi Baliga, who also with him ran Tata Lit Live. And together, the two of them were one of the reasons why I kept returning to Bombay and hanging out with writers like yourself. So I'm so grateful to know them. And I really just honor their space, their presence, and their mindfulness with you.
I'm very sorry for your losses there. When you told me that Anil and Shashi were gone, I had met them both, and you meet so many people at a festival like that. I thought, I won't remember who they are. And yet they came with such clarity back to mind and such precision. They were both, Shashi was such a sweet person. And yeah. Anil had such presence. It was really, was so sorry to lose them, or for your loss there.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to jump right into talking about Actress, which came out earlier this year. Michael Ondaatje said that the starting point for his novel, The English Patient, was a man in a desert watching a burning object in the sky. That was the inception image. Was there one like that for you and for Actress?
Yeah, that's such a flaming image from Michael Ondaatje there. He's a very visual writer as well. I think I started with an atmosphere, and the characters just kind of crystallized in that atmosphere. I think I started in the kitchen at the beginning of the book, and a child trying to apprehend its mother Watching is too strong a word, because watching is visually precise, but it's just that general sense of the mother going through the cupboard, saying, that there's such a drama looking for the marmalade, such a drama eating the toast, and the child's watchfulness and patience and observation right there. So I put a dog under the table. He kind of disappeared then. The lost dog. There's a lost dog running through this book, but I knew when the scene starts to fill itself in, you begin to know things like the exact nature of the floor tiles, and that these are red and black diamond floor tiles, and one is more porous than the other, and it wears down. So the blacks stay good for a century, the red kind of get a little dip in them over the years. So it gets super microscopic and precise over time, but it fades in then quite slowly as you sit in the scene.
And the atmosphere of the 70s, isn't that what you're tapping into when you're drawing on Catherine's life?
Yes, in one way you do a lot of research, and in another you do none at all, because you have to know it in your bones somehow. So I knew those buses and those streets and that rain. I knew that path along the canal. I knew the sound of people crying. There was so much crying in the 70s. People and fighting and all, it was a much more sort of, I don't know, untrammeled sort of time. Not a very rich time in Ireland, and then what I love, that sense of glamour that wasn't enormously glamorous actually, but Catherine had it, whatever it was, and she rattled around this semi-bohemian set in Dublin, and they didn't all end well. They were in a very conservative Catholic country, and so they were a little too raucous, a little too hectic. They drank too much. They didn't end necessarily well. And all of that attracted me enormously. There's a feeling of gossip through the book.
And Nora, the book's narrator must resolve the very complicated relationship that she had with her mother, Catherine. What about the mother and daughter equation fascinates you? It's a trope that we see running through literature, but what is it particularly for you that absorbed you enough to want to flesh it out in a full form of a book?
I think writers, when I listen to people speak, I sometimes think they're just talking about themselves in some dramatized way. The stories that we populate our life with, the cast of characters in our head that we're talking to or about. The old days, you'd be on the phone doing it with your friends, whatever these, but actually they're just aspects of the self. This kind of conversation comes from the self, and maybe finally about something of ourselves. So, and also I look at a lot of books and see how the authors are splitting themselves into different aspects and characters. So it is on one level Jungian, that Nora and Catherine are aspects of my writerly self, I suppose. Nora, the very quiet writer, and Catherine, the performative, whatever that is you do on the page, you're making up the voices, you're acting it out. So those are the starting points. Those are the beginnings of the archetypes. But also, it's a very connected and tangled sort of relationship, and it's about separation and connection. Those are very strong problems for a character. What do you do about your parents? I mean, you don't choose them, but where do you go from there? And that's our modern drama, really. It wasn't a drama some centuries ago. You just put up with it, whatever it was. Now it's a drama.
Yeah, now you can get an internet rage about how your mother didn't feed you when you were 4. One time that she failed, yes.
Yeah, or you blame and entitlement are interesting issues too. I mean, these are why we blame and how we blame. These are great fun. Yeah, I should go off and write another story immediately thinking about all of this.
Well, Nora is kind of keen to understand her mother, to also perhaps understand the mechanism of fame. and how that interrupted her childhood, because Catherine was this very famous actress for some period of time in her life. And then there is also this sadness of, when somebody's life has kind of flopped, when they've had a really good run and then things have kind of gone to ash. Nora talks about how, her childhood birthdays seem to be almost like sets for her mother to kind of perform her role as an actress, as the mother. I'm now playing the mother, or the devoted mother. How do you think kids of famous people reconcile with the idea of performative authenticity?
I think Hollywood at least is probably getting better at that. It's not
in a good way or in a bad way.
in a good way.
They're hiding their cracks better.
Yes, yeah, that's true. But the Mommy Dearest stuff, I don't know. That was Joan Crawford. And actually, when I was writing a story about an actress's daughter, I knew that this was the paradigm. That the daughter is overshadowed and feels hard done by. Nora, just to go back to our previous question, calls at the end of the book for an end to blame. That we pull back in our projections somehow. But it goes better than most for Nora and Catherine. I couldn't possibly say about, there are conversations about women going to work in the 1970s. But, if you look at the sons of very famous men, they often don't do as well as they might. That Oedipal wrangle can leave them in a difficult position. Nobody's complaining about men being super successful and the damage it does to their children. So
unless you're Martin Amis.
Unless you're Martin Amis, yeah, who managed all that very, very properly.
Well, there's a central incident in the book. A man is assaulted. Catherine is punished and put away. And of course, men continue to commit extraordinary crimes while remaining in the riding seat. Was the rage about these kinds of inequality a driving force for the actress? I mean, I asked this in the current atmosphere of where Alec Baldwin has unknowingly and without any malice or intention shot a colleague, and he's now, obviously out there having lunch. Is that something that you think about, of the kind of culpability that accompanies the actions of women, but not necessarily of men?
I don't think the Alec Baldwin correspondence holds, really, because a man has to eat, apart from anything else, no matter what has transpired. Catherine's intentions are not good. She attacks someone, and that is, I think, not a good thing to do. Also, she attacks someone for the wrong reason. She attacks the wrong guy for reasons that aren't sufficient. There are men that she could have properly done terrible revenge on, and yet they do escape. Those men do escape. But her anger becomes misdirected in some way. The book, because so much of our fiction, so much of what we see on television is about violence in one way or another, whether about guns, about sexual violence, maybe not so much in India, but certainly in the West. So I wanted to draw a very clear line about the difference between fiction and reality. And that difference happens in the bodies of others, basically. That's where the line is drawn. You can think what you like, but if you attack someone, then the line has been crossed. Perhaps I'm not making that terribly clear, but women are punished for everything. Women are punished for boasting. Just thinking about the boastfulness of men generally, and how that somehow is well received. But a boastful woman is punished to the end of the world, really. Anyway, so yes, it is a punitive culture for women.
You know, when you're saying this, I'm thinking of the character the Margaret Garner, the slave that Toni Morrison based her book Beloved on. And I think the New York Times asked her what she thought of the fact that this woman had killed her own child. And I think she said something to the effect of she had no right to doing it, but she did the right thing.
That Toni Morrison said that. Well, that's an
Yeah,
amazing,
about
that's an
Margaret
amazing
Garner,
thing.
you know, the slave on
Yes,
whom she
indeed. Yes.
based.
Yes, the Beloved. I think Beloved is one of
Yeah.
the core key texts about mother-daughter relationships, and of course it ends extraordinarily badly for the daughter involved, who is killed rather than the mother kills her to prevent her becoming enslaved, and the daughter then
A slave.
returns.
Yeah.
Returns as a kind of zombie presence, a ghost of, and lives with the mother then at the beginning of the book, or haunts the house. 124 was full of spite, and it's one of the best, most radical treatment of both of much of the psychological content of motherhood and daughterhood. But whether she did the right thing or not, that's an amazing quotation, Siddharth. And I would be of probably the other opinion, that she should not have killed the child. that there the line is most definitely crossed.
Well, you know, Nora, in a sense, goes on to craft an adulthood that's antithetical or remedial to her childhood. You know, she has a functional marriage. She has a better rapport with her daughter than she ever enjoyed with her mother. Was this, do you think, a response to her troubled childhood? Or is she, as Anne Enright has said in describing one of her, in one of her books, where she talks about how better people sometimes are just luckier people, you know, or good people are simply luckier people.
Yeah, fortune has an awful lot to do with things, but with how things turn out. But Nora in the book has a solidity. She has a trueness of heart. And there is a sweetness to her connection to her mother that can't be affected by the wide world. And also, Nora knows that her mother is marvelous. So when the world says her mother is marvelous, she has no problem agreeing with her. So that whole fame thing works in their favor rather than the other way around. But she makes for herself a different, quieter life, but one of creativity. She's not dependent on the wills of others in order to do whatever her thing is. So she's a writer. She has her books on the shelf. They're disappointing the way that books always are, but they exist. And also, she's not beholden. She's not obliged into one role or another, as her mother constantly was, by the needs of a kind of second-rate fictions that Hollywood and the stage produce all the time. So her mother was her mother wanted to write at one stage. She thought that was the solution to having no jobs. She didn't know at 40 that was the problem was 40. That it wasn't going to be solved until she suddenly was acting granny roles. So yes, it's remedial not of the relationship with her mother, but it's remedial of the of the relationship to the world and or how you organize your creative self in the world.
Well, you know what I loved about her and reading about her, Anne, was a validation of something that Gabriel Garcia Marquez had said in an interview with the Paris Review, where he talked about how important it was to be happy to be able to write, you know, because there's this general belief that you have to be incredibly miserable to produce. You have to be incredibly unhappy. And here was a woman, you know, who grew up in very trying circumstances, you know, who grew up around a very troubled, interesting person, but she was able to make some amount of balance, some amount of substance out of her life. And I really, the older I grow, I kind of appreciate people like that over people like Catherine. I don't know if that makes sense to you, or maybe I'm just aging.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine is what we used to call histrionic, you know, so it's all So and quite reactive. It's quite to do with the audience, you know. But Nora has an inner sort of capacity, and I think Catherine becomes emptied out more or less by fame and by the multiplicity of her roles, whereas Nora's role remains steadily single. But you know, I've written unhappy, I've written happy.
What's better?
What's better? I think you have to be unhappy starting out. I think it's very important to be utterly miserable starting out, okay? But if you continue that way, I mean, that forces the craft, doesn't it? It really, you know. But once you have developed an ability to write a sentence, then you then maybe happiness is your ally instead. But you know, they're different. You know, different books, different times, and one is never says, "Oh, that was a fantastic book. I wish I could write that one again." You have to meet your own time in your own life with whatever book is going to happen right then. And if you could control it, oh my God, that would be fantastic. But you can see writers who become kind of stuck in the same book or in the same kind of creative age. Of course, their life changes around that, and the books become less interesting then.
Well, you know, also I was very taken by the sorrow of Catherine. I was thinking of something Zadie Smith had said many years ago when she said that postmodernism was the triumph of symbol over experience.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I was thinking so much where she bought into this mythology of myself being this actor, and only to realize that, you know, you're only going to be as good as your next film or as your next book, because the terrible thing is people forget and people move on. So
yeah, well, if you're dependent on the crowd, as actors are, and you have no control over the crowd, and the crowd is quite a shifting, irresponsible animal, really, and a very difficult ally to maintain, alliance to maintain. But if you're not dependent on the crowd, then things are easier. You know? But actors have no choice, but because that's their trade, that's their life.
And I wonder if we can speak a little about, you know, your writing process, because I know you take process very seriously. I remember you talking about how you kind of, you know, really go to work, you know, which I appreciate so much. It's just, you know, that you actually sit down in front of a computer and there's a full discipline. Can you tell us a little about the discipline and the structure that you...
I don't know. I mean, at this stage, it's like breathing, you know. It's like I wake up and I work, really. And if I don't work, I don't know what else to do. I could go to the shops. I haven't been to the shops in a good while. And I suppose that's partly because my life is getting increasingly sort of staid, you know. I have nothing else to do but work. But I have been working, you know, the last 4 weeks really hard on a short treatise about Joyce's Ulysses for the centenary next year. And I think, why am I doing something that's so difficult now? Why can I not just sit and write a nice short story and be happy? But, you know, well, short stories are also extremely hard. You have to be quite deft at short stories. But something about the challenge does engage me, and it keeps me going, and I keep at the desk. But I love writing fiction. That's what, every time I finish one of these essays, I think, oh, you know, fiction is so... I don't feel lonely when I write fiction. I feel lonely when I write nonfiction. People say, why don't you write more nonfiction? I said, because it's lonely, and fiction makes me feel fulfilled. It's just, I find there's great company in it.
And your characters keep us great company. So that's a compliment I would just pay you right back. What is the editing process for you, Anne? You know, Amy Tan hires an editor who works with her closely on her text, in addition to her publisher. Have you ever thought of working with an editor, or do you have friends who read your draft? How does it work for you?
I did have I had a kind of semi-professional kind of relationship with a friend in the business who read The Gathering and didn't like any of it. And so I ignored that advice, all the advice, and the book did very well. And I was like, and so after that, I kind of thought, well, I have to be very careful because I don't write traditional, conventional, I might say, narratives. I'm very sentence driven, so it's a bit. So there are some writers who are very suited to a collaborative process, and they're very open to it. And people say, "Oh, I don't think that would happen." I have them all the time in my creative writing workshops. People who really thrive from knowing how a thing is read. But my process is much more enclosed, and I rarely send until I'm fully done. And before then, it's a kind of shifting. I dip back into it again and again to sort one thing or another thing, and then the final product isn't a flawless or simple kind of narrative. It's quite it has quite a kind of restlessness to it. And I don't know what, and I sometimes feel perhaps I shouldn't do that, but to me, I want the book to shift and move. I want it to intrigue, and for people either to start trusting it and just go where the book is going. So I'm not writing very public kind of objects. They're not really very public objects, the books that I produce.
When I see you, when I read your books, I see you almost like a kestrel or a hawk, that goes like dipping one level to the other. And that's how your relationship with time is, whether it's in Actress or in The Gathering, you just go back and forth. I love how malleable, that aspect of your writing is. I'm now being actually asked by the tech team at Tata Lit Live to raise one question that was asked by, an audience member. And this, I'm going to take a question by Gunjan Patel, who says, and this is something that I think you might be very qualified to answer in many ways. Is there such a thing as a happy family?
When I was growing up, families didn't even try to be happy. That wasn't an ambition. You just were who you were, and you spread all your nonsense, and you said whatever you wanted to say. That was the way family life was in the 1970s in Ireland. Now, at least, we have some sense of, harm, respect, all those kind of things that are becoming more fashionable to know how to live with other human beings. So I think there are inbuilt separations that are necessary when you're growing up. And those separations are always going to be interesting. And it's always going to be either a rupture or a loss, or you move away. We're always moving away.
And I think that you hold it also beautifully in Actress, and I think that you have such an extraordinary book in this. I feel it's like a bookend to The Gathering. The potency of the sentences, the rhythm, the way that you oscillate in time as if it's a little play object for you to kind of, move around the floor. I would love to continue speaking with you, but I know that we are on limited time. So all I can say is that Actress is a book that everyone should go out and get right now. And Enright, I hope that you come back to India and you hang out with us again. We really miss you. We love your work. We salute your vision. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
We thank the authors for this stimulating session. Thank you for joining us today. A big thank you to our title sponsor Tata and co-sponsors Tata Steel and Tata Projects. This festival is powered by Godrej. This session was presented by the KV Mariwala Philanthropy Initiative. If you love books, then do visit our knowledge partner, landmarkexcite.com. We have many such exciting conversations lined up for you, including Marlon James in conversation with Shalini Puri discussing the need to break literary conventions. Catch it tomorrow at 7:15 p.m. IST. See you there.